Welcome back, radio entrepreneurs, listeners, and fans. I'm producer Nathan Gobes. Excited to be filling in for JDavis. I'm excited because we've got two Marcs with us today, Marc Z of Marc Z Legal Staffing and Marc Furman of Tarlow, Hart, and Rodgers. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Nathan. Great to be here and great to be co-hosting with Marc Furman.
Nice to see everybody, and really looking forward to hearing from our next guest who does incredibly important work.
Yeah, me as well. And that guest is Pete Farrell, partner at Cohen Cleary. Welcome, Peter.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me on, and good to see all of you. And although in Zoom land, it's great to be together again. Thanks for having me.
Nice to see you, Pete.
Thanks to have you on the show, Pete.
Marc,
Pete,
if you want to take it away.
Perfect. So, Pete, you have really developed a very special niche in the education field, and your practice has really grown in it. And you have a talent as a seasoned litigator on the back end if some of these issues go further. But one of the big things that we've had a chance to read and hear over the last 20 months is the whole in-school, out-of-school presence, virtual, remote, in-person education, and how it affects, disabled students, students with learning disabilities, and also balancing how things will proceed post-COVID. So can you share with us some of the issues you're dealing with and have dealt with?
Right. Well, thanks again, Marc. That's a great question. A lot to unpack there. So, focusing right in, when you have a student who's on an individualized education plan or an IEP, they have a plan in place that has services that are, they have, let's say, speech and language services, 3 times a week for half an hour. How does that happen in a virtual or remote environment? Your guess is as good as mine. My colleagues who are educators really did the best that they could under really unprecedented circumstances. But in reality, when we have students with disabilities, and sticking with the example of a speech and language issue or diagnosis, something like apraxia or something like that, that's really, really difficult to do when you're in the remote environment. And so trying to figure out, when we talk about remedies for when things go sideways with an IEP, we have this new thing, or had this new thing, I should say, COVID compensatory services versus regular. It's like light versus not light. COVID compensatory services was kind of a function of the situation, which was trying to catch kids up and make up for the lost time. I think overall, the biggest issues right now are reintegrating children with social emotional needs, which are, again, really at the top of the list. Students had a difficult time. There's so much disconnect and loss of chance, opportunity for those, let's say, in the 3rd grade at the Smith Elementary School in, Main Street, USA, there's the lunch bunch. Well, guess what? The lunch bunch didn't meet for the last, X number of months. And so the benefit and the intervention from these talented educators and interventions for these young people just didn't happen. So, across the land, you've got moms and dads and people of all walks of life who, not surprisingly, fellas, I did not miss my calling as a teacher. My hat's off to these teachers that in the last, 20 or so months have really pulled the rabbit out of the hat. There's a lot. Marc, I know we're on limited time, but I could go on all day about that. The teachers really had to be on all the time, asked to do a lot in frankly, an environment in which there wasn't a whole lot of benchmarks, training, and they really just did, once the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education came out with some guidelines on how to, picked up the ball and got us to the goal line. So that's, and things certainly are improving. We've got a long way to go.
Very challenging environment. I have my daughter is a teacher, and during some period of time she was teaching twice the number of classes, right? Because half the kids were coming in person and half remote. So And the teaching techniques are totally different if you're
Right.
if you're teaching using Zoom versus in person. So
Right. And young people, Mark, to that point, when we're talking, pre-high school, their brains are not, developed to really immerse themselves in that environment. Any kid, student in high school or college, remote learning is the wave of the future. Online courses, if you're taking an MBA course, wherever, and to access really good programs. But young people who need the building blocks of really their formal education, this was a real damaging blow to that process. So, teachers and students alike really struggled for quite some time.
Pete, how did you work with some of the families to sort of cut through the regulations that would not necessarily be health related, but were affecting the students' mental health? Because I'm sure there are, besides the physical aspects of being concerned about obviously contracting COVID and
Right.
dealing with those issues, there were a lot of mental health issues by not having courses, by having to just have Zoom, by not having a
Right.
certain course schedule. What were some of the ways you dealt with situations like this?
Really, it's a great question again, Mark. I mean, you've done your homework. This is a pretty, the biggest challenge, and how I guess that I had to deal with is that reconciling this, remote environment with the fact that in Massachusetts and elsewhere, there's compulsory school attendance less. And what we had was these young people that they went dark. They wouldn't show up on Zoom, or they'd be absent, or mom and dad would be working and trying. They're literally holding their world together, both hands on their forehead, because they've got to try to work. They've got kids at home. They've got kids on Zoom. They've got 3 kids, one in each room on different courses. It's like bandwidth issues, technology issues. I mean, we're talking a full slate of problems and issues. And I think the biggest thing I would say is school adjustment counselors. Really, I did the yeoman's work in terms of how things went, because you can reach out and at least communicate. And I think most everybody, us as professionals included, have embraced the technology of Zoom or video conferencing or whatever. So while it wasn't perfect and it wasn't that in-person, interpersonal connection that people crave, certainly young students with their teachers, it was at least something that got us through. But really the concern lied with students that had severe needs and intervention that was required. And those students, for the most part, I think the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed really stepped up and said, those kids with the most significant needs, we're going to bring them in, and we're going to administer to them, in person. And while there's risk involved, obviously, with the virus, the risk versus the risk of regression and losing all of these wonderful gains that we've made with these children and students, it really, that was probably the best way to address those things. But it's not the students that are so high needs, it's the students that fall in kind of the middle that are identified as having some needs. For example, with students on a 504 plan, which is 504 of Section 504 of the Rehab Act of 1973, less regulated, but not any less important in that these are kids that have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, reading, writing, learning, all of those things. And really outreach to those students is critical. And I think overall, we did a good job of capturing and gathering data on who those students were, identifying who those students were. And, I got a lot of calls from moms and dads and what do I do now? My child doesn't want to log on. I'm getting inquiries from school, like, where are they? Are they alive? Are they sick? Are they in the hospital? And that, coupled with outside of the school, which is a lot of the work that I do in the mental health area, is having the right clinician. And of course, there were outpatient clinicians. And of course, there's a massive shortage in getting an appointment and telehealth and all of that stuff, which of course, no industry, not the least of which was the medical field, was prepared for. So And the courts certainly, I think, same thing. We were closed for a long time. So we did okay, but those were some of the issues.
What's going to happen though? There's some students that they need a lot more attention that they did not get from Zoom or the limited teaching experience. And isn't there a fear that they're going to be kept back? And that could be very taxing on the school system, because as you say, the high you're able to complement, but the low,
Right.
it's just, there's serious issues, aren't there?
Right. I think so. Even in we call it, the COVID times, as some people refer to it, even the goal is to always advance or promote that student to the next grade and to bolster their experience, educationally with support and interventions. So it's not so much a matter of being kept back. I think we're teachers, like Marc's daughter and others, we would tell you, we're going to meet these students where we find them, because, while we've got students that are all over, it's connecting the dots of where these students are on the map. And that's going to take a little time to shake out. I don't know. I couldn't tell you in my wildest of imaginations, Marc, how long that's going to take. But that's, I think, the attitude and the ambition of our system and the commitment of our teachers to say, to our students, what do you need? What can we do to help you? And then on top of that, when you have special education services under an IEP, you have that, added layer of reevaluations, seeing where these students are at in terms of their current level of educational performance, and the goals and benchmarks and where they are with their IEP. That's the purpose of the annual review with the IEP team, and also the 3-year reevaluation to see if they're making effective progress.
Excellent. Excellent. Did you have a lot of remote hearings during COVID to discuss some of these issues with the schools and in your advocating for the students?
Yeah, so once the students got kind of going and education kind of returned after a brief hiatus, some districts did it better than others. We wrapped our brains around how to best proceed with team meetings and things in a remote environment. So I did a fair amount by Zoom. I still do. I think even as we're starting to come out of COVID, we're still embracing the Zoom technology because frankly, I think it's here to stay. It's convenient. It allows parents to Zoom in from work, and it's good communication wise. So I think Zoom is here to stay in a lot of areas. And this is one of them as well. And I think that the education, teachers and educators, administrators, they all did pretty well adapting to that. Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, Peter.
It's hard to imagine what this would have been like without having access to Zoom, for
Really,
so many things.
Yeah, the technology, has been pretty amazing. And now it's as like using one of these, right? It's people have just kind of read into it and they learned it because out of necessity, and it's been good. It's been good because it's given us what we need to make it happen.
Peter, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me, Nathan. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Of course. That was Peter Cohen, partner at Peter Farrell, partner at Cohen Cleary. If people want to reach you, what's the best way to do so?
Sure. We have offices in Taunton, Quincy, and Plymouth. The best way you can reach out to me by email. You can get us through our website, cohencleary.com. We're at 508-87. I'm going to get the phone number wrong because I'd never use it. 508-877. Hold on a second. Forget the phone number. Farrell at cohencleary.com. It's easiest way to get me is that way, or send me an email and I will certainly respond. I probably get a ton of emails, Nathan, every day. And that's the best way to reach me because I'm not always at my desk because now the courts are opening again. I'm around and of course I'm in and out, but happy to talk. These are really important issues. You guys are doing important work in getting people connected with legal services as well. So I'd like to also personally thank my friends Marc and Marc for having me on again. It's really great to see both of you again, and you, Nathan, as well. Happy Thanksgiving, guys, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Great to see you.
And of course, Marc Z, if people want to reach you at Marc Z Legal Staffing, what's the best way for them to reach you?
So first of all, Google Marc Z, M-A-R-C, and the letter Z. or Marc Z Legal, MarcZlegal.com, or 617-338-1300.
Great, thank you. And Marc Furman, Tarlow, Breed, Hart, and Rodgers.
I can be reached at 617-218-2025. That's my direct line, or at mfurman, Furman, at tbhr-law.com.
And by the way, guys, I almost gave you the fax number, so my staff would have been really annoyed, and that's why I hesitated. It's 508-880-6677 is my team at Cohen Cleary and Taunton. And great to see you guys. And I'll get the phone number right the next time.
Thank
How
you.
embarrassing, but good to see you guys. Thanks.
Nice to see you.
Thanks.
Thank
And
you.
we'll be back with Radio
Good to be with you.
Entrepreneurs. We'll be back after this break.